This is an E-System PC, and I got it from FreeCycle or Freegal, and it's been given to me and has Linux on it. It's also a PC that I'm just going to check out, have a look at, and then pass on to someone else who wants a system with Linux on it, or wants a system that they can put Linux on it. And the case you might recognize. I did a sort of Google image search, and this comes up as an Icon, IQON case, an E-System case, a Philips case, and various other brands seem to have used this identical case, or this case but larger. And it's kind of a crossover between black and silver, and it's got a DVD rewriter, got a memory card reader. It's a little bit dusty. Looks like an Intel Celeron. USB at the front here, power reset. And it's quite long, quite deep, but we'll have a look in the back. At the back, we've got everything built in: audio, USB, network, video, printer, serial, and keyboard and mouse. Power supply with a switch that the switch is working. Looks fairly dated because they've got this extra bit screwed onto the back. There's a fan here. There's nothing in here. It says it's an E-System personal computer model EI207, AC 230 volts, and there's no switch there. It's just a label. So let's also have a look inside. 2 screws hold the side on. This should hopefully slide off. And then inside, we've got a Foxconn. We've got a Foxconn motherboard. We've got a Foxconn heatsink fan here. Looks pretty clean. We've got a hard drive here. There's just one there. And it's an IDE system for the optical drive at the top. But then it's got a SATA cable for the drive at the bottom. And this is an ACE power supply, ACE, 550 watts. That seems quite generous. I wonder if this has been replaced at some point. It's got 2 RAM slots, 2 sticks are in there, and the motherboard is 45GM. So that's most likely socket 775. And yeah, I guess apart from the cables being sort of in need of some tidying up, it looks okay in here. I'm just going to have a very quick look at the capacitors. And you can also have a look if you want. They all look pretty flat, so I'm not seeing any problems there. I'm not really seeing any cause for concern anywhere. There's just a bit of dust at the bottom. But yeah, let's check the date on this power supply if we can. 2013. I wonder if this system's from 2013 or older. Let's plug it in, see if it works. Okay, so I'm going to press the switch on the back, and then I'm going to press the power button on the front. It's quite loud. There's the monitor powering up. You can just about see an E. Intel Celeron 1.8 gigahertz. 1280 megabytes of RAM. That seems a random amount. Has it got a 1 gigabyte stick and a 256 megabyte stick? So I've got DVD rewriter, and then we've got a Hitachi 220 gig drive maybe. CMOS checksum error. 2007 date on the BIOS. Let's just press delete and go into the setup. It is really loud. I'm surprised how loud it is. Super BIOS. I'm not sure what that's about. CPU feature. Advanced chipset. Integrated devices. Power management. Not sure what that is for. Power management. Let's just reset the BIOS settings just in case. Here's our voltages. So 3.3, 5 volts, 12 volts. CPU temperature 19. System temperature. Smart fan control is disabled. Let's enable that. And also just load optimize settings. I still got this thermal throttling. Do we want that on or off? I don't know. But we do want smart fan control on because hopefully then it will be quieter. Save and exit. It should restart. And now it is much quieter. That is much more relaxing. There you can sort of see the ES. And let's see if anything's in here. There's nothing in here, so it's got nothing to boot from for the CD, but it should boot from the hard drive. Hopefully. Seems to be taking a really long time to do nothing. I've gone into the BIOS and selected the hard drive as the first boot device. It was set to the CD drive for some reason. So let's see if it will boot from the hard drive now. It's 164 gigabyte hard drive. There's my cat meowing, but it doesn't seem to be booting, so that's a little bit odd. I've tried booting from a USB drive and it's not really liking that idea. It's not booting from this hard drive, so I'm going to try a different drive in the system. Okay, so this is just a little laptop drive that I have that has Windows XP on it. And it'll probably crash because it's from a different system, but it does at least show that there's a problem with this drive in here. Yeah, it's just rebooted because it's trying to boot Windows XP from a system that it doesn't, from a different system basically. So I need to try and get it to boot from a USB or something so that I can try and reinstall an operating system on here. Let's just go for safe mode, see where it crashes. I think this is where it's trying to load some kind of driver and it'll probably crash or maybe carry on. So that got to the Windows XP logon screen in safe mode and then just restarted. So let me try and find a boot disk. Okay, it seems to be booting into Windows XP and then crashing. Yeah, I need to basically do a fresh install of Windows so that I can try and work out what is going on, why it is resetting all the time. Is it because of the XP drive in there? Or is there something wrong with the PC itself? It doesn't seem to want to do this. You know, when you start a project and you think, oh, this will be nice and quick, I'll just have a look what's on the system and check it all out, make sure it works, and you expect it all to work. But something's going on with the system. It was very slow to load from the USB drive before it got to this point. And we're getting some random errors and crashes. So I think I probably need to start by testing the memory, checking the processor. It's screwed into the motherboard, the heatsink, so that's a bit more awkward than the Intel clips, I guess. But yeah, let's have a look. So it's got DDR2 RAM. This is 256 megabytes of DDR2 RAM. We've also got a sys module. I've never seen one of those before. DDR2, 1 gigabyte. Look at these little sys chips. I didn't know they made memory like this. That's interesting. Let me find another 1 gig stick and put that in so that it's got 2 gigabytes of RAM. It's now got 2 gigabytes of RAM. CMOS checksum error, so we're going to need to replace the CMOS battery. CMOS battery now replaced. So I disconnected this fan and that made it much quieter, but here you can see the fan for the power supply and it is red. That is not a good sign. That means it's basically a cheap power supply, and the only thing setting it out from other power supplies is the fact that they've used a red fan. But I quite like this blue fan on the heatsink though. All the screws are undone and we've got quite a lot of dust. Just an aluminium heatsink and plenty of dust down there. So I'll just get a cloth and wipe some of this away. The thermal paste was completely dry. These capacitors look okay. Let's see what processor it is. This looks like an Intel Celeron 430. 1.8 gigahertz, 512K cache. Just trying to see if it's dual core or single core. Guessing it is probably single core. Maybe we can find a different processor to put in there. Yeah, pretty sure that is single core. So if we can find a dual core processor to put in there, that should be much better. I'll just have a look. So I've got an E450, which is a dual core processor. Hopefully this will work. Let's try and find out, I guess. If it does, we're then gonna have a dual core system rather than single core, and hopefully performance will be noticeably improved, or rather we'll have a system that can actually install an operating system onto. Thermal paste. And I'm just going to put the heatsink on. Whoops. And see if it actually, the thing that it screws into has disappeared into the back of the system. So we're going to have to take the back off and yeah, hold it in place while we screw it on to see if, anyway, it just makes life more difficult basically. Okay, I'm going to try switching it on. Now I'm going to connect the fan for the heatsink. That's probably a good idea. and it's posted. So we've now got Core 2 Duo, 2.2 gigahertz, 2 gigabytes of RAM, and yeah, that's better. If you boot from the drive that's connected, we may as well. It's still probably going to crash because it's Windows XP from a different machine, but a dual core processor is a nice upgrade. 2 gigabytes of RAM is better than 1.2. And I'm a little bit more hopeful about this system. Although, obviously it's going to crash just now, as it did. The motherboard's actually got some jumpers on it, which is quite, you don't tend to see that much these days, I guess. Smart fan control, it's forgotten about that. We have temperature, yeah, CPU temperature is fine. I've plugged the CPU fan into the wrong bit, but yeah, we have a system with a better processor and more RAM. We now just need to work on an operating system, and I need to attach the heatsink properly. So I need to take this back panel off, find the back plate, reattach it somehow. I'm hopeful I can do this without having to remove the motherboard completely from the system. I'm going to line up. Oh, there we go. Now I need to hold that whilst also putting the heatsink on the other side. Okay, we are back. I've screwed the heatsink on. I've plugged the fan into the right bit. The smart fan control seems to be working. I want to try and boot from USB. So this is the USB I want to boot from. It doesn't want to boot from my Ventor USB, that's a shame. It does seem okay booting from my Windows 10 USB. So maybe I'll just try and install that and see how far we get. And I think it should be a 64-bit processor. And this is going much quicker as well. Although now we're on to a slow bit. So it doesn't really seem to matter what I do. I can't get this system to properly work. Try and install an operating system and it resets itself. Let's just plug in a Windows 10 SSD and see what happens. See if this will boot into Windows 10 or still restart and crash. I should probably test the memory, see if there's some kind of memory issue. This is booting from this SSD here, which has got Windows 10 on. And we've got driver IRQL error there, acpi.sys. Could be the Windows 10 install, expecting newer hardware. Let's just give it one more try and see what happens. think there are some sharp edges on this case. I'm really not getting very far with this system. Let's boot from a Windows 7 USB, see if I can get anywhere with that. Guess we could have a problem with the power supply. Not something I've really, I've not actually checked it with a power supply tester to see if the voltages are stable. Just assuming that they are, but they might not be. And there could also be capacitor issues with the motherboard that we're not seeing. Just because they're not leaking doesn't mean that they're all good. Well, there could be a motherboard problem. Were Foxconn a reliable brand of motherboard? Let me know in the comments. Okay, we're getting this error. Not liking this, to be honest. So this is a new one. Let me just stop that over there. This is trying to boot from the USB drive that has got a Windows XP installer on. I'm just getting error messages at every stage. I have reset the BIOS. I've replaced the CMOS battery. I suppose I could take out the memory that was in there and use the memory of mine, see if that makes any difference. It does seem like the USB load speeds are very slow, so that doesn't seem like a good sign either. I'm beginning to suspect there's something wrong with the motherboard, perhaps. I've replaced the processor. Let me swap out some memory. I'm also trying a different SATA cable. So maybe the SATA cable that's in the PC is bad, or the SATA port might be bad. Let's just leave it to try and boot from this drive that's got Windows XP installed on it. Okay. Should get some mouse movement. What's happening with the mouse? Control Alt Delete. Can I log on? The USB is connected. Maybe there is something wrong with either the power supply or the USB ports on the computer. Maybe it's still just loading USB drivers. If this works, was it the SATA cable or was it the memory? I changed two things at the same time, which means you don't know what the problem was. I should have just changed one thing at a time. Although I can put the memory back in quite easily, or switch the SATA cable, see what happens. But apart from the USB not working right now, we've got to this point without it crashing. Maybe let's try the original drive with this cable, see what happens. Okay, we're back with the original hard drive connected with a different cable, but it doesn't look like it's going to boot from this drive. It's trying to boot from the CD drive instead, so I think this drive is bad. Okay, so I've put the original stick of memory back in. We're trying to boot from this Windows XP drive, I think, and it's rebooting. So I think this memory is the problem. Take this out, switch it back on, see if we boot into Windows XP. Yeah, I think this memory stick is the problem, even though it's a nice little sys module that I've never seen before. Do you think this is the problem stick of RAM? We've probably also got the problem with that drive in there not working. I tried that again. It's not booting from that drive at all. Not got USB keyboard or mouse. I could probably plug in an actual PS2 keyboard and mouse, but this could do with an operating system reinstalling. I guess this memory was the problem, so we should be able to try installing an operating system now. Okay, I've gone back to the original SATA cable. So original SATA cable, XP disk, drive, my memory, and it's working. So I'm going to plug a keyboard and mouse in. Okay, I've got a keyboard and mouse plugged in. It's working using the PS2 keyboard and mouse. So let's try reinstalling something on here, and I'll put in another stick of RAM so that it's got 2 gig. Okay, I'm going to try and install Windows 7 on here. Just because things keep disappearing. I'm pretty sure I had a Windows XP bootable USB, but don't know where that's gone now. It's got 2 gigabytes of RAM. It's got a laptop drive in there. Hopefully I'll be able to format that, install Windows 7 on there, and see what happens. I am concerned that the USB ports aren't working properly. Seems slow, and the USB keyboard and mouse just stopped working. They were working at one point, now they've stopped working. So yeah, we'll see what happens, I guess. This has taken far too long, and it's still quite a low spec machine, but I need to try and find a Linux bootable drive that will work on this machine. Ventoy is not working, and then I could make a nice little Linux machine, but I think what I want to do is simply see if I can install an operating system and then leave it running, make sure it's reliable, and then pass it on to someone else, and they can install whatever they want onto this machine. So this is getting much further than it did before. I wasn't really even getting this far. So removing this bad stick of memory seems to have helped massively with this system. This is a mouse with a ball inside, so it isn't the best, but yeah, let's just have a look. Let's delete that one, install a fresh install of Windows 7 and see how we get on. Okay, we are in Windows 7. That was quite a nice install process where it didn't ask me millions and millions of questions like Windows 10. I've got 2 cores. It's using 553 megabytes of RAM, and we've got a total of 2 gigabytes. And seems relatively responsive. Where is my computer? Properties. Core 2 Duo E4500 2.2 gigahertz. I don't know why it says 539 megahertz there. That does seem a little bit odd. But we can check these settings out. 32-bit operating system. And let's have a quick look in Device Manager. Display adapter, it's got the drivers, it's got an unknown device, it's got a processor, but I need to install some apps to sort of see what speed the processor is running at. Seems weird that this says 539 megahertz. But yeah, we're up and running, and that's better than where we were before. So I'll leave this running for a bit and install some tools, and then have a look around the system and see if it's all working properly. We're back. It's the next day. This has been on for a little bit of time, 20 minutes now. I'm just gonna have a look at some tools to have a look at the performance of the system, the temperature, that kind of thing. CPU-Z, core temp being my kind of go-to programs for this kind of stuff. And yeah, we'll see what temperature we're getting and what performance we're getting from the system, or rather the processor. So temperature 20 to 22 degrees C, that's pretty good. Let's have a look at CPU-Z. So we've got the dual core processor, 2.2 gigahertz. We've got a main board which is a Foxconn 45GM with the i945G chipset, BIOS date of 2007, memory running in dual channel. Graphics are the Intel, and a quick bench gives us a 163, 164, and the processor speed is running at just under 2.2 gigahertz, which is the correct speed for the processor. So that is looking good. I don't have any reference points to click down to for some reason. Not sure why that is. But yeah, you can see it kind of went up to 100% CPU usage. multi-thread ratio 1.96. So let's just leave this stress running 100% CPU and see if the temperature changes much. So this has been running a while now. We're up to 39 degrees C, which is still a good temperature. I've also run Crystal Disk Mark to see what speeds I get from this little laptop drive here. And these are not great, but it's probably fine for Windows 7. We've got sticky notes, Windows Media Center, Desktop Gadget Gallery, Windows DVD Maker, Media Center, Media Player, Windows Update, XPS Viewer, accessories, a whole bunch there. WordPad. WordPad was always a useful thing to have on a PC. It's a shame that that isn't included anymore. Quite a lot of games. Backup tools. Got the classic control panel. And, you know, we can snap your windows to different sides. That's not exactly a new feature, but very useful. This mouse has got a ball, so it's not great. But yeah, it's quite responsive. Even though CPU-Z is still running at 100%, the system is quite responsive. And we've got Aero, so have we got the fancy Alt-Tab options? Maybe we need to switch that on somewhere. This was a neat feature of Windows from the past. When you had problems, you could click a button and it would take you directly to where the settings are changed, rather than trying to take you to the internet via Bing. So yeah, it's much nicer not having to go onto the internet for every single issue. There is still the search help, but is this going to search locally? Yeah, this is local help. It's not making me go on the internet. So yeah, this is all working really nicely. It seems to be running reliably, and once we replaced the faulty RAM, we were back up and running. It did take me quite a long time to get to that point though. And I think now that with the system's back up and running, I might put this back together and it'll be ready for the next person to do whatever they want. They can install Linux on here if they want, or any other operating system, I guess.